to set up camp here. We'll move a little bit around in the gospel towards the end, but we're going to stay in the Gospel of John this morning. On Wednesday of this week, in our daily Bible reading, we will begin the Gospel of John. And so I thought we would take some time this morning to think about the prologue of this Gospel, which is unlike the others. The others get right into the story in some shape, form, or fashion, and you turn to John and it's like, oh, we have a philosopher on our hands. And you kind of wonder what he's doing. You wonder what's going on here. It's extremely powerful, and we're going to focus on the first 18 verses this morning. And our focus, like John's, is going to be on Jesus in John chapter 1. And what we want to think about this morning is how this is the gospel. In verses 1 through 18, it's the gospel of who Jesus is and what Jesus is going to do. And so we want to think about the gospel in its most beautiful form together this morning. Let's begin in chapter 1, and we're going to read it all here at the beginning, and then when we, as you can tell on your handout, we'll kind of just go section by section after this. John 1 at verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to bear witness about the light, that all may believe through him. He was not the light, but came to bear witness about the light. The true light, which gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And we have seen his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. John bore witness about him and cried out, "This was he of whom I said, he who comes after me ranks before me, because he was before me. For from his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, the only God, who is at the Father's side. He has made him known." Well, there's a lot to unpack there, and we're going to try and do that to the best of our ability today. So we'll start in verses 1 through 2, and we want to see Jesus' relation to deity. And what the gospel writer starts with is saying that Jesus is in fact deity. He is God. And I'm afraid that we've read these verses with the wrong emphasis sometimes. We often read these verses like this. You've heard this before. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It's probably how you've heard it before. But D. Bowman said that was wrong. And so if D said it, well, then he's probably onto something. D said we need to put the emphasis on God. And I like that. So maybe we should read it, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And I got to admit, I think that carries a little more punch. John is purposefully setting up a comparison between Genesis 1:1 and John 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In the beginning was the Word. And then what's interesting, we won't do it right now, but if you look over at 1 John 1, he does something similar as well. In the beginning was the Word. When we think about the beginning, when we think about creation, we often think of God the Father is kind of where my mind goes, at least. I think that's the case for most people. But this phrase tells us that Jesus was there as well. That Jesus also is pre-existent. And can I just say this real quick? That's one of the attributes of God that gives me the most trouble to comprehend. I can understand existing on forever in perpetuity. I know that's a long time, but I'm alive, so I can understand what it would mean to continue being alive. But not having a beginning, that hurts my little brain. As I try and think about that, because everything has a beginning, except for the things that don't, which is God and Jesus. And that just kind of breaks my mind as I think about that to some extent. But we see that Jesus was there. And we see that not only was he there, but he was with the Father. That they were in the presence of one another together. It's not like they were one God over here and another God over there. The Bible is very clear. God is one. You'll remember in the beginning when he says, let us create man in our own image. And then he says, outright, the Word was God. Let's make no bones about it. Let's not cause any debate here. Let's just say it outright. Jesus is God. He wants you to read the entire gospel, the whole book of John. He wants you to read this with this in mind. Jesus is God. And so he starts at the very beginning by saying, Jesus is God. And then he's going to end the book in chapter 20 at verses 30 and 31. These things are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. And all of this is written, all of these signs, all of kind of lectures that he gives, all of these statements he's going to make in this book, all point to the same thing. Jesus Christ is God. Let's look at verse 3. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. And what we see in verse 3 is Jesus' relation to creation. Genesis states that God spoke the world into existence. God said, let there be light. God separated, we see, from the waters. And what we find out is that Jesus is that Word. We could look at a passage like Psalm 33 at verse 6. By the word of the Lord the heavens were made, and by the breath of his mouth all their host. We see that word is Jesus. Hebrews 1 at verse 1. Long ago, at many times and in many ways, God spoke to our fathers by the prophets. But in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, through whom also he created the world. And so as we picture creation, as we picture God creating everything, let's not leave the Son out of that. And his role in that is emphasized here at the very beginning. This verse sounds weird to us, doesn't it? It sounds a little repetitive. We read this verse and we're like, well, that doesn't really roll off the tongue, does it? But what he's doing is he's saying the same thing from a positive and a negative viewpoint. Positively, he created everything. Now, let's say the opposite of that in true form. There's nothing that was created that he didn't create. And what he's doing is he's making sure nothing is left out. You can't say anything. You can't come up with an example or anything of something that exists in creation that he didn't have a hand in. All right. I'm going to give you some Greek real quick. If you care, great. If not, I'll be back with you in just a second. Okay? Here's the Greek. The verbs in verse 3 are aorist, and what that means is that they were completed in time. It's a completed action in time. However, the verbs of verse 1 and 2 are imperfect. They refer to a continuous action. Now, for you grammar nerds, great. I hope you enjoyed that. Now, for the rest of you, you can zone back in now. You ready? What that means is that there was a particular point in time that God created the world through Jesus Christ. There was a particular point in time. But continually and always, Jesus is the I am. That didn't happen at one point in time, well, and that's it. No, forever and for always. As Jesus says, before Abraham was, I am. I know that grammar stuff can get a little irritating sometimes, and I can tell you, I read that somewhere. It's true, but I read that somewhere. But that God created the world in a particular point of time, but Jesus is continually God. All right, let's look at verses 4 through 9. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to bear witness about the light, that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but came to bear witness about the light. The true light, which gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. Verses 4 through 9, we see Jesus' relation to light. One of the big themes in the Gospel of John is light versus darkness. Good versus evil. That's what the light and the darkness represent here. Going back to these connections to Genesis 1, God's first creative act was speaking light into existence. And I know it's been a while now. It's been a couple of years now that we started in Genesis. But remember, on the days of creation, light comes into existence on day 1. The sun, moon, and stars don't show up till day 4. Light exists by the creation of God, not by the existence of the sun, moon, and stars. In the Gospel of John, darkness stands for sin. And just as God's light burst onto the scene in Genesis 1, so Jesus' light conquers sin. Verse 5 is an interesting phrase. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Now, some of your versions may say that the darkness did not comprehend it. And the word can mean that. It can mean overcome or comprehend. But in the Gospel of John, it seems to always mean overcome. The point is, the light shined in the darkness, and the darkness could not drown it out, no matter how much it tried. No matter how much the enemies came in and tried to shut Jesus down, tried to shut him up, and then even as they hung him on a cross, the ultimate shutting down power, they couldn't shut down the light. And the light still shone. And then he's going to bring John into the picture here. He doesn't want you to misunderstand who John the Baptist was. He doesn't want you to misunderstand what John's role was. He came to tell people about the light. He came to say, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Here is the light. Jesus came on the scene and says, I am the light of the world. So there's a distinction between the two. And Jesus came not only to teach against sin, but to deal with the problem of sin and darkness. All right, let's look at verses 10 through 13. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. And in this verse, or in this section, we see Jesus' relation to humanity. And Jesus came into the world, the very world that he created, and yet humanity didn't even know him. Jesus came into the world. He went to God's people, the very people looking for a Messiah. But they did not receive him. It's a sad story. But we need to understand verse 12. But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, to them he gave the right to become children of God. We need to understand that Jesus Christ is the only way to God the Father. That's it. There's no other hope for salvation. There's no other hope for forgiveness. There's no other hope for reconciliation than in Jesus Christ. Can't help but think of John 14 at verse 6. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. There was a video clip going around. I saw it on Facebook. I'm told that's because I'm old. That the youngins use Instagram now. But I saw it on Facebook. And it's of some priest, pastor. He has the robes and what on, so I'm going to say he's a priest. And he is very progressive. And we'd probably use the term woke. And he says that any time he reads John 14 at verse 6, he stops before the second half of the verse. So he reads, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He won't read the next phrase, which says, no one comes to the Father except through me. He says he won't do that because, well, that's combative. And that's ostracizing. And that's exclusionary. And that keeps people out. And I just shake my head and think, no, that's how people get in. That's the answer to all the problems, is that it's Jesus Christ that opens up a way to God. John 14 at verse 6 may be the most powerful one verse in the planet. That this tells us exactly what we need to know, that we know that Jesus Christ is the way and the only way. I never will forget when Tiger Woods got in trouble the first time. The first time he wrecked his car and everybody found out everything, not this most recent time he wrecked his car and everybody found out everything. Y'all remember that? That was a mess. I mean, that was on all the news outlets and everything. I mean, the greatest golfer probably of all time, and this happens. And they were talking about it on one of the Fox News shows. I can't remember. And one of the commentators said, "Well, you know, I hope that Tiger will get back to his Hindu roots, so that he can find peace." And that he can straighten his life out and hopefully get peace with what he's done in the past and what's going on now, and maybe his family can have peace. And I remember, I believe it was Britt Hume, said, I understand what you're saying, and I can appreciate that, but I'm going to say something a little more controversial. He says, I hope Tiger Woods can find Jesus Christ. Because what Tiger Woods needs is forgiveness. And it's only through Jesus Christ that one gets forgiveness and one gets the peace that only God can offer. And I remember thinking, woo! A lot of people need to hear that sermon. A lot of people need to hear that 38-second expounding on where the forgiveness of sins comes from. I doubt you'd hear anything like that on any TV news outlet, except for maybe TBN nowadays. The young ones don't even know what TBN is. Jesus came into the world to bring salvation, but the people looking for salvation rejected it. But if we'll believe in Jesus Christ, we can have that salvation by being born of God. Real quick, in verse 13, the phrase there, who were born not of blood, that's of kinship, is what that's talking to. That's not talking about the blood of Jesus Christ. We're not born because our families are a part of it, like the Israelites were. We're not born through it because of the flesh, just because we're Jews or not, but by the will of God. The Gospel of John and the rest of the New Testament make it quite clear. We are born of God when we are baptized. And he's going to spend quite a bit of time telling Nicodemus about this in chapter 3. A passage that I'm convinced people are trying to misunderstand, because it's quite clearly talking about baptism. All right, let's look at 14 through 18. One of my favorite verses. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. I'm going to read that a little bit differently, because it's the Greek word. And the Word became flesh and tabernacled among us. And we have seen his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. John bore witness about him and cried out, "This was he of whom I said, he who comes after me ranks before me, because he was before me." For from his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. For the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, the only God. Some versions say the only Son of God, who is at the Father's side. He has made him known. Part of the reason I put the word tabernacled instead of dwelt among us there is because he has some Exodus imagery going on here. And he wants us to understand this glory of God. In the Exodus, the glory of God was that pillar of cloud that led them by day, and that pillar of fire by night is referenced as the glory of God. In the Hebrew, it's the Shekinah. And that moves into the tabernacle. You remember they finished building the tabernacle there in Exodus chapter 40, and the glory of God moves in so that Moses can't even go in. And he says, in seeing Jesus, we have seen the glory of God. That's interesting. Because what the New Testament is going to say a few different times, we see it over in Colossians, we see it over in Hebrews, is that when you see God, you see Jesus Christ. When you see Jesus Christ, you see God. They have this glory together. People thought regularly about the glory of God, but now we see it of the Son as well. Verse 16 talks about from his fullness. In Colossians 2:9, I like the way the Christian Standard Bible words this. For in him the entire fullness of God's nature dwells bodily. The older versions, the Old King James, for the entirety of deity or the Godhead dwells in him bodily. Because God came and dwelt among us in the form of man, we have received grace upon grace. Law, that perfect justice that, let's be honest, we don't want. If every sin was struck down with perfect justice, where would any of us be? We wouldn't be here. Law came through man, came from Moses, he says. But grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. The free gift came from the Son. And then I think kind of the emphasis here that he's going to punch the rest of this gospel. No one has seen God. Only the only Son of God has seen him. who is at the Father's side, he has made him known. A little bit later, one of the disciples is going to say something. He thinks he's not asking for much. He says, Lord, he says this to Jesus, Lord, show us the Father, and that's enough for us. Which is kind of a funny thing, Show me the greatest being in existence, and I'll be fine from now on. And, well, first of all, no one sees the Father and lives, we see. But Jesus kind of, have I been with you so long, and you still don't know who I am? And you can imagine, like when we get onto the kids, they don't see it come. What? What'd I do? And the point is, Jesus is telling you, I am. I am God. When you look at me, you see the Father. And so as this story is going to progress, John the Baptist is going to take his disciples and he's going to constantly be pointing to Jesus and leading people over to Jesus. And when people get to know Jesus, guess who they get to know? They get to know the Father. When people know the Lord, they know God. How do we know God? How do we know the one whom no one has ever seen and lived? Because, ladies and gentlemen, we get to know Jesus. Have you ever seen a real life example of like father, like son? Sometimes you see somebody and you're like, they look just like their dad. They sound just like their dad. Sometimes those family resemblances come pretty strong. And I am told that as I'm getting older, I'm sounding more and more like my father. Actually, not that long ago, my sister talked to my oldest brother in one day and talked to me on the phone the same day, and she was a little creeped out at how much we sounded alike. And that, well, where does that, it came from the Father. And sometimes we look at, I'll tell one on myself. I saw it. I saw like father, like son. Y'all know my issues with traffic. Yeah, I haven't mentioned that before, right? We're sitting in a drive-through, and it's taken a while. And Charlie, in the very back of the van, in his car seat, leans over and goes, "What's taking so long?" And you can imagine the look I got from Tiffany, because that's not the like father, like son that you want, but we understand that idea. How much more God the Father and God the Son? When they have no problem, whether we understand it perfectly or not, they have no problem saying we are one. And the rest of the Gospel of John is written so that we may know that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. So what do we do with all this? What does it mean? Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is the gospel. We live in sin. We live in a dark world of sin. And God, the creator of all, came in the form of man to bring light and life. Sadly, most have rejected him. And he tells us about that. He says not to be surprised by that. He says that most will reject him. But those who believe in him, they become children of God. When we believe and obey Jesus Christ, we receive grace. We come to know and have a relationship with God. Now, I told you we were going to move around a little bit here at the end. Let's go to John chapter 3. John 3, let's look at verses 16 and 17. We can quote the first one, right? For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. Let me tell you how much God is on your side. If God just wanted to kill and condemn everybody to hell, He would have kept Jesus home. Why send him into the world for that? Just light everything on fire and be done with it. But instead, he sent his son to suffer what he suffered. Guess what? So that you could be saved. So that we can go be with them in eternity. And so he's going to say, do not reject God by disbelief and disobedience. And we know that's what the Jews in Jesus' time did. What he's saying is we got to pick a side, light or darkness. Look at verse 18. Whoever believes in him is not condemned, but whoever does not believe is condemned already, because he has not believed in the name of the Son, of the only Son of God. And this is the judgment. The light that has come into the world, and people loved the darkness rather than the light because their works were evil. For everyone who does wicked things hates the light and does not come to the light, lest his work should be exposed. But whoever does what is true comes to the light, so that it may be clearly seen that his works have been carried out in God. What side are you going to pick? Light or darkness? And then it's in chapter 14 where Philip says, Lord, show us the Father and it's enough for me. And Jesus says, whoever has seen me has seen the Father. You want to know the Father? You want to know God himself? Study these Gospels. Come to know Jesus. Spend time with the Lord. Submit to him. Study him. Learn from him. Let him be your rabbi, if you will. Become his disciple. Have faith in him. Obey him. Be buried in the waters of baptism with him. Be cleansed by his blood. And we'll know the Father. And once you come to know the Father, once you come to know the Son, you'll get to spend eternity in heaven. And you remember what we said last year? We had 4 sermons. We had 4 lessons in a row on eternity. You'll probably remember because we sang There's a Great Day Coming all 4 Sundays. But what's going to make heaven so great? It's because God's there. The one that we've been trying to spend our whole life getting to know. Coming to understand and appreciating what he did for us. We'll get to spend eternity telling him, thank you. And won't that be wonderful? Won't you respond to the gospel this morning? So when that time comes, when what Jeff prayed for this morning, when that happens, when the Lord returns, we can all go home to be with the Father, to be with the Son in heaven, and to be with one another. Let us know while we stand and while we sing.